Hi guys, it's Toby from Heavyweight MMA. Today I was lucky enough to have time to talk with Brandon Harris, strength and conditioning coach and co-owner at Premier Fitness Systems. He's also better known as the head strength and conditioning coach for the UFC fighter Suga Sean O'Malley. Now, Brandon isn't just a trainer. He teaches people how to improve their performance all around. This includes working with not only resistance and conditioning, he also works with breathing, meditation, and general conditions to make people better than they are. Have a listen. Very interesting guy, very contactable guy too if you'd like to do some work with him. Please have a coffee, sit back, listen, and enjoy. Okay, it's Toby from Heavyweight MMA today, introducing Brandon Harris, who's the strength and conditioning coach plus co-owner at Premier Fitness Systems, also strength and conditioning coach for UFC fighter Sean O'Malley, and most importantly, a gentleman with a very healthy and positive vibe. Thank you and welcome to the show.
Toby, thank you, man. I appreciate you having me on, brother.
Man, just to introduce the podcast a little bit quickly, I'm a martial arts enthusiast, not professional, but martial arts enthusiast, and this show is basically structured around MMA and combat sports. As you've mentioned before about Sean O'Malley, the combat athletes are very extraordinary athletes and people, you know, and this podcast generally is talking with combat athletes and delving into their minds, talking about training, their experience, how they fight, why they fight, etc. And your side of training, etc., delves into that to an extent as well. And the things I've heard you talk about in relation to training with MMA fighter Sean O'Malley, plus also your own ethics on training, etc., are very interesting to me. So I'm very happy that you've given me the time to have a little talk today.
Heck yeah, man. It's an honor, you know, and it's cool to be able to connect with somebody across the world and share our passion. So yeah, thank you again.
That's it, man. Coming out of Macau, China, joining in with Arizona. It's an interesting world now that we can catch up like this, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
That's it. Now, I just wanted to first of all talk to you about your feelings on like training, strength and conditioning, personal training, etc. Because, you know, it's very easy to be a personal trainer, right? Like I can go out and do a 2-week course and be a qualified trainer, and I can go out and try to teach people. But obviously in that case, they're going to miss so much. And I just wanted to get your feelings on what it is to be a strength and conditioning coach and to be a personal trainer that's trying to develop people. Like, what is it to you?
Well, I think it's a coach first off, and to me, a coach is a little bit different than just a trainer. To me, a coach is somebody that is passionate about the people they work with, is passionate about developing not only physical qualities but also mental qualities, and really just for me, it's being curious. It's continuing to broaden my perspective and broaden my knowledge with the ultimate goal of helping the people that are in front of me and the people that are trusting me to help them achieve their goals. And that could be an MMA fighter, that could be a mom of 4. You know, really it's being extremely passionate about physical development as well as mental development and in this effort to help people achieve their desired outcomes. So yeah. And
in that way, you're being, in a way, you're delving into being not just a trainer, a physical trainer in a sense, but being a life coach in a way as well, right?
Yeah, I think those qualities you can't separate them. So I think if my passion is helping people achieve desired outcomes, I think the mental piece is inseparable from the physical piece. I see those two being just so intertwined that you can't separate them. I think most things are, probably everything is a spectrum, right? So it's not a one versus the other, black, white, right versus wrong. They're interwoven. So for me, in a pursuit of being better at helping somebody achieve, again, their desired outcomes, I started to be very curious with not just how to build physical qualities, but also how to help people achieve more of a growth mindset. And then those things just started to intertwine. intertwined.
That's the thing. They all integrate together to an extent, right? Like as people kind of forget, sometimes a healthy body means a healthy mind, and spiritually you can improve yourself by different physical pursuits as well, right?
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
So, man, just on that, I'm kind of interested in your take as well on the martial arts athlete, the MMA athlete, or the other combat athletes, be it a boxer, be it a kickboxer, Thai boxer, anything really, jiu-jitsu, wrestler. What are your take on it? Like, what's your take on these sort of people, and what are your feelings towards these sort of people as a trainer and a coach?
I think the skill itself is so interesting because it encompasses so many different things, right? If we're talking MMA, it's like the ultimate generalist. It's also a specialist, right? It's almost like its own specialization. It's becoming, right? I think you can look at, being an expert generalist in that from a coach standpoint. I want to be really good at a lot of things, right? I want to understand energy system development. I want to understand mindset. I want to understand breathing. I want to understand periodization, right? Enough to where I can benefit people, right? I don't just want to be the guy that only understands, mindset, right? Or I don't want to be the surgeon of breathing, although we need those people, right? But in MMA, you have to be good at so many different things. It's just fascinating, right? There's a lot of qualities that have to be developed. I think it's the ultimate expression of competition. I think there's so many pieces of it that are just awesome. So yeah, I think there's a lot that makes it very fun to be involved and be involved on the the side of helping an athlete again become great.
Yeah, it just has so many facets, right? When looking at MMA alone, apart from all the skill factors, like in the early days, they'd break it into Brazilian jiu-jitsu, boxing, Thai boxing, wrestling. That's kind of how they broke it up. Now it's kind of intertwining more, but not only that, they've also obviously increased working with gentlemen such as yourself for strength and conditioning, also doing, as you also talked about, breathing, diet, rest and recovery, all these other facets that also make it even more complicated, but are pushing the sport to a higher level than it ever was before as well. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. And I think looking at just the mindset piece of these athletes, there's a lot of risk, right? There's a lot of, you really are throwing yourself out there, right? These athletes are extremely, extremely vulnerable, both physically and mentally, because of the sport that they compete at. I find that fascinating as well, right? Especially as men, we tend to be very ego driven. And what is harder on your ego than getting beat up in a cage in front of other, millions of people, right? So I really find that fascinating, how that aspect of the sport is evolving, and you're starting to see, the athletes that are riding to the top and the ones at the top, they seem to all have more of this calm demeanor. They're less reactive. They're more of an artist within the sport, and I think that's really fascinating as well. That you can't just get away with being just a physically dominant fighter. Like, you have to be physically dominant, but right, it's starting to evolve. So I find that fascinating as well.
It's amazing, actually. Yeah, the point you made, like, these guys are vulnerable just on the nature of the sport. Like, every day they're in practicing all these different combat sports where they're prone to serious injury. Every day they're exposed to that. So that's a big risk of the sport. That could ruin their career. Just every day is a risk. And they are vulnerable to that. Then standing up against another world-class athlete that's also training to kill them in front of now the social media, the actual coverage of these events is just incredible. The actual pressure on this one or two people fighting in the octagon or ring is absolutely incredible. And then after that, then you get the second vulnerability is this social media piece alone, where they can just get destroyed and attacked. And you could jump to Sean O'Malley on that. Like, how good a guy is he, man? Like I love watching his podcast. I love watching him fight. He seems like a really good guy, but people like to tear into him all the time. And it's just like, there's a lot of pressure on these guys physically, mentally. And then you've got all this attacking of the social media every day, right? Very difficult.
Yeah. I'm really grateful to be able to witness that firsthand, and to be there with Sean and the team ringside has just been such a cool aspect of my career. I've had the opportunity of working with, baseball World Series winners and PGA Tour winners, and I have a pretty unique career in that I've had the opportunity to work with multiple high level athletes in different sports, but I've never been able to see it like that firsthand. I've never been in the dugout to watch one of my baseball guys go up in the ninth inning with 2 outs and, right. I've been in at PGA Tour events, but I've never, I'm not right there like the caddy is. I feel like the opportunity with Sean has just been so amazing for me to see that and to see how good he is mentally, because he's cultivated that. He really has. Like, he's worked at that and he continues to work at that. But I also think he's gifted there naturally, which tends to be the case, right? These guys, athletes, guys and women that rise to the top, they're gifted with some good genes, some good DNA. They've gravitated into an appropriate sport for their DNA. But then they work their butts off and they cultivate it. So it's been really cool to see, because to me, getting locked in that cage, that is the most vulnerable you could be as an athlete, I feel, right?
Exactly. And you're actually in the corner with him, or you're just at ringside?
Yeah, I've been the last 5 fights, I believe it's been 5 now, where I've cornered him. So again, probably one of the coolest opportunities in my career, for sure.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Like, for you to be there and witness how he prepares mentally and of course physically, but the mental side is the biggest thing to witness, I would say. And then for you also as one of his friends and coaches, to be there and you're putting him into the cage and you're like, you can't help anymore. It's all over. It's all that preparation that you've done. And it's almost terrifying, right? To be on the corner of your friend or whoever it is, even your gym partner or it's your student for you. And watching them in that vulnerable position, it's very, very frightening. Like, I feel worse being in the corner of a friend of mine than being in the ring fighting. I feel worse in that respect, because you can't control it, right? It's all in their hands.
Yeah, I've never fought myself, so, but I imagine, and yeah, it's interesting because I always have these crazy, adrenal dumps, like adrenaline dumps
exactly.
after the fight, and like, I'm older than Sean and Tim, and our team, it's a cool team. Taquino, who's a world champion jiu-jitsu competitor, and and then you have myself and Tim and Sean, and Taquino and I always stay back, right? We never go out. I'm like more have a beer, sit at the hotel type of a guy. But Taquino and I kind of hang out. We have this tradition, and I'm ready to go to bed from this adrenaline dump.
Exactly.
That's it's pretty, and I didn't do anything, right? I just was there. So
yeah. Actually, yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? That, like, you do actually get a real adrenaline dump. When they win, you're really sharing that win as well, right? Like, you feel ecstatic and elated at the same time. And I'm exactly like you, whether I'm fighting or whether I'm in the corner, I feel like sleeping afterwards as well. It's funny.
Yeah.
So just to jump into yourself, man, about your history, it was kind of interesting hearing that you were picked on a little when you were young, and so you kind of self-motivated into doing some weights, because that's what you think, like, I'm going to get stronger, etc. And you made some buckets of rocks, and you were lifting buckets of rocks. That's cool, man. Cool story, right?
Yeah. I mean, I just fell in love with it, and when I was younger, I think like most people, it was, a selfish thing. It was probably a very ego-driven thing, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because I think that's a part of your self-discovery as a youth, as a young man. But yeah, just kind of, I loved training for different reasons, and it's evolved over my life and my career, and I've really been doing it for majority of my life. So it's really cool too, just how it's evolved in my own training, where I went from very aesthetic driven. And I was, an athlete, but I didn't know what I was doing, to then becoming a trainer and a coach, and, kind of coming up in that bodybuilding culture, which I think most people did and probably still do in the field, to then moving really away from it and more into more of the, say, movement culture. I was Ido Portal, who's, a pretty big name on social media and YouTube, who also helped Connor. I've done multiple workshops with him, and then kind of coming back in the direction of classic strength and conditioning with a different perspective. So it's really cool to see how it kind of ebbed and flowed in my own life and how that has benefited me as a coach.
It's awesome. And it parallels with the gentleman I'm talking to. So there's high level martial arts athletes. They start when they're young. Generally, the general story is they're young, they have some reason. It might be the same as yours. And instead of doing weights, they found the karate gym, or their dad told them that they should go there. And then that started their journey. And starting so young has given that opportunity to, flow and grow and learn. And if they've stuck at it, like if they had that consistency through their life, then they're basically masters. Like, you can earn a certificate of masters in 2 years after your degree, right? So you guys that have been doing it since how old were you? You're like 14 or something, or 12 years old, you said, right?
Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, you're basically a master in human movement and coaching and all this, and that's a great thing that there's people like you around that have dedicated your life to coaching, that you can then teach people and make people better in those areas. And you sound like you've really evolved from that focus on looking better and being a bit stronger to someone that's looking across the broad spectrum of improvement, basically, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah man. Yep.
So just talking about Sean O'Malley, etc. My focus on that a little bit because of the show, and also the fact that a lot of the social media that you're on involves him or involves talking about him and different things. You mentioned about the breathing, and how does that breathing work benefit someone that is a combat athlete, out of interest?
Yeah, I see it as being, there's multiple benefits. And to me, breath work, mindfulness, meditation, and that's, kind of all the same thing to me. It's maybe the only thing that I can see that can benefit every aspect of your life. I haven't yet found a reason, or haven't found a thing in my life that doesn't benefit from me practicing mindfulness. So you have on one side, you have the mental side, which is the breath is the anchor to the present moment. It grounds us, it pulls us into flow state. I think when the mind and body is connected, that's when we find flow. So when I'm worried about the future, if I'm worried about what's going to happen in the fight, if I'm worried about what people are going to think of me, I'm not going to perform as well. I'm not in the present moment. Well, the breath is the anchor. When we are following the breath, we cannot be concerned with the future, right? We might drift, but we come back to the breath. So for me, teaching somebody simple breath awareness is a really powerful anchor to finding flow. Now, a fighter is probably going to, in a fight, they're focused, but I think they can heighten that focus with this type of practice and learning that they always have the breath. So you have this ability to access flow through the breath, which I think is a very powerful tool. And there's a ton of applications there. You're basically teaching people meditation, you're teaching them mindfulness, and then eventually they learn how to access that. Let's say we're getting ready for a fight. There's nerves. There's, you're scared, you're afraid, you have fear, all of these normal human emotions. I think through breathing, we learn that those emotions are not wrong. And we can lean into them more, and we can use them to actually fuel performance. So you have that side. You also have how we breathe influences how we move, right? So the way I break this down for people, like, it's not really the deep science, is when you take an in breath, really every bone in your body is affected by the airflow. When you when you have an out breath, every bone, like our skeletal system, our exoskeleton moves as we breathe. So when you think of that, breathing is a powerful tool to affect movement patterns, right? So for me, there's this foundation of breathing that is everything. It teaches people to find flow. It anchors people to the current moment. We can alter our state of consciousness, right? It's like it's a tool to move somebody in a direction, to create a state shift. It's also very, very powerful in getting somebody to load more efficiently, to move weights, to be more explosive. So
yep.
So for me now, it's principle one, it's step one, and I try to incorporate it in every session and every time I sit down with somebody in some way.
Yeah, man. I think, like you said, it's applicable in so many different areas in relation to general training, and especially the martial arts. When I was young, I did karate, and it sounds kind of not that relevant, but the way they teach to expel on the breath when you actually attack and these things, and a few of these things about breathing that they taught, was like quite traditional martial arts style of karate. And I feel like it stayed with me. And like, I can really tell in things like jiu-jitsu, and even just when you're doing any physical activity like weights, etc., that you know how to use your breath better than many people that I've trained with. Like, especially jiu-jitsu, you can hear people, one thing they might be going for a submission, they start to, and you see like it's unnecessary, or if they're getting attacked in some way, they start to breathe very fast as well. And some controlled breathing is much, much better in these sort of situations as well. It's quite interesting.
Yeah. I mean, you have power lifters that use it for a brace, right? So, if you're grabbing somebody, you have that. If you're producing power, if you want to express power, the exhale breath, which, I think that's what you're explaining. And I didn't do karate, but the out breath, and you're actually able to express more power through the breath. Really what it is it's our diaphragm. It's, our thoracic diaphragm and our pelvic floor act like a pump. So there's science there that can explain that the martial art masters figured out, probably thousands of years ago, whatever, you can trace it back. They were intuitively tuned in to how powerful the breath is, right? You see that in the yoga traditions. You see that in the Zen traditions. There's the breath is extremely powerful, and it can be used in so many different ways to benefit, our mind and our body, and also to connect those things. So,
yeah. And then the piece you're talking about as far as mindfulness, I think I agree definitely that taking time out of the day, be it a small amount of time, whatever you can afford to in your day to give to it in doing some sort of meditation, focusing on the breath, and most essentially just forgetting about the daily things and the stresses of life, and trying to concentrate on the body and breath alone is a nice practice for people to have, right? Whether they're an athlete or whether they're just a normal person.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look at you're in a fight and how stressful that is. And if you can't regulate your nervous system under that kind of stress, as a fighter, good luck. So I think you can train it, and obviously sparring and in other fight like scenarios you have to do. But I think you can also cultivate that skill set through things that aren't going to beat up the body. And to me, that is, that's another aspect of where breathwork comes in. Breath holding, nasal breathing, where you're increasing CO2 levels, and you feel like you're panicking. So you can train somebody to deal with that kind of panic in a controlled environment, so that they feel more comfortable when they're exposed to it in a real life scenario, or, in the case of martial arts, a fight. So there's a lot of ways to integrate it that are extremely powerful. Actually, I find it fascinating. Yeah.
Brandon, you might be able to help me actually a little bit. I've been doing something for the last probably year or so, and I don't even know really why I'm doing it, but I feel like it benefits me somehow. I've been doing like I'll do weights workout, I'll do sauna, and then I'll go to the pool and I do like laps underwater. And I'm doing kind of what you're sort of talking about, is trying to hold my breath and go as long as I can, maintaining like it's moving because I'm pumping my arms and legs to keep moving underwater, and I'm trying to go as long as I can. And when I feel uncomfortable, I'm just trying to relax my body and keep going, like pushing it to the point that I can push it. I feel like the benefit would be like, example, jujitsu. You're getting smothered, whatever. You can't breathe properly, and you will learn just to go through it. Maybe less oxygen than you need, but still pushing through it without panicking. Is that the sort of benefit you're thinking, or is there another sort of benefit for holding the breath and pushing through some sort of movement?
100%. Yeah, I mean, there is even more to that, but I think the easiest way to break that down is you're training yourself to be more comfortable when you're not comfortable, right? You're exposing yourself to an uncomfortable situation, and you're training yourself to deal with it, which would be similar to, again, you're being choked. Yeah. You're also exposing yourself to levels of CO2 and basically oxygen debt, oxygen hunger, which is similar to when your heart rate is high in a fight, right? So you're intuitively doing you're intuitively doing something that is extremely beneficial for yourself or for anyone. And I think breaking it down and simplifying it is you're learning to be calm in a stressful scenario, which is extremely powerful, right?
So yeah, I feel it. I feel something from it. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can't stay calm, and what's cool with the water is the water will expose you quick, because it's actually, you'll go further and longer when you stay calm. So I've done a little bit of jiu-jitsu, so there's probably carryover there, where if you are being choked, just staying calm, going to your breath, that feeling of oxygen hunger, that exposure to CO2, learning to just deal with it, right? So yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yeah, that's what you're saying about, you definitely over that time, I've really learned how to relax with the actual movement to begin with too. So you start, instead of like trying to swim fast, you're just relaxing your body and swimming like in an even sort of tempo. And the other thing about being underwater, it's almost meditative, right? Like it takes away other senses and whatnot. That I really enjoy being underwater, even if you do have that oxygen debt. Sometimes it's like I enjoy that feeling of swimming underwater. It seems to be some sort of meditative state, right?
Yeah. There's a really cool book. So the gentleman that wrote a book, Breathe, James Nestor, I believe, is the author. So he was on Rogan, and this book has gained, it's a great read. But his prior book was called Deep. So that book is all about deep sea diving.
Yeah.
So they're really interesting. And I'm not an expert in this, but I want to say that there's this mammalian, or I'm probably going to butcher this, but there is something about when we're underwater and how it affects our nervous system, that what you're explaining. Again, I'm probably butchering this, but there's something that we have as humans, that when we're underwater, we feel calm, we can hold our breath longer. There's an effect there, so it's worth looking up if you're interested.
Yeah,
in
no,
that.
it sounds, I just wrote it down. So yeah, I'll have a look at that. That's interesting. And the other thing, do you ever use like any type of meditative state for your athletes, that you help to coach them in that sort of state? Like, do you ever ask them to calm down, close their eyes, regulate their breath, and start to give them any, positive sort of messages, etc.? Anything like that you use?
I do. So I've, for probably like 2 years now, I pretty much a standard where I buffer the start of the workout and the end of the workout with breath work. And I use it as an opportunity to really shift somebody's state, as well as, increase their focus and their intention. I think it's pretty powerful to give yourself that break. And I'm talking 2 5-minute buffer, where I coach people to lay down, and then we go through different breathing patterns. And then that's an opportunity for them to check in with themselves. That's an opportunity for them to, how do they feel? I think these are things that we can teach athletes and we can teach individuals, which is extremely powerful. For me, it's almost like I'm checking in with myself and am I centered, right? And by breathing and by tuning into that, I can tell like I'm off, like I'm scattered. Now, at the same time, that's okay. That happens, but at least we're aware of it. And now there's this opportunity to focus in on what the goal of the day is, right? That's really, really powerful. And then the newest neuroscience tells us this, that like there's this optimal series of events where, slowing down, shifting our state, checking in with ourselves, understanding these goals, and making sure we know and we connect why we're doing what we're doing, and then go do work, right? Then get after it. And, it's got to be hard if that's where we are, because your body doesn't change. You're not going to get faster. You're not going to get stronger or bigger without hard work, right? But within that, it's, we need to ebb and flow there, right? I always tell people that volume and intensity varies, but intention doesn't. And so the point I'm trying to make there is that we can be intentional in everything. Even if it's a recovery day, we can still be intentional. And then we do our work. Maybe it's a recovery day, or maybe it's a get after it day. It's an output day. And then we finish with breath work. So now I teach athletes, men and women, to downshift their nervous system. We probably were driving the sympathetic system. We're going to come back more parasympathetic, and then, reflect on what you did. So I think that's a really powerful tool to teach people in their training.
That sounds great. Generally, like personally, I've used like some apps, etc., for meditation, and it seems that they have their own focuses on different things they want to achieve, like, mindfulness, etc., and being aware of the body before drifting into some sort of goal based on the breathing, etc. And I think that's a great idea I might try that actually, as far as putting goals into my own goals into some sort of meditative practice. I think it's a good idea. I haven't done it myself, so interested to try.
Yeah. One of the things I've played around with a lot that I like is the prep breathing, is doing a breathwork ladder. So I'll do this typically outside. I'll do it with people jogging or even just walking. So it's really simple. And what I find is, again, it pulls people into the present moment. There's this, when you're holding your breath or when you're tuned into your breathing, it's something that's actually happening, right? Like there's this, we're pulling in oxygen, where our bodies are using it. There's all of these reactions happening, and then CO2 is going back out. So ultimately, by following your breath, you're being pulled into the present moment. And that's what we want in training, right? We want to be focused. Like if you're trying to, lift a bunch of weights, it's not going to do you good to be worried about what you have to do later, right? Being present is a big thing. So this particular drill, we go all nasal. And again, we're walking or we're jogging the whole time. So we start at 5, inhale, exhale through the nose. I always try to get people to think of it like a wave. It's like a flow. So there's this rhythm, there's this flow. We do 5 breaths. At the end of the 5th breath, on the exhale, we hold. We keep walking, we keep jogging. CO2 builds. You want oxygen. Now we're on 4. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. 4 breaths. All you're out. At the end of the 4th breath, exhale, hold, right? 3, 2, 1. Really simple. A lot of times I'll do 2-3 rounds of that, and it just pulls people into the present moment. So for myself, if I'm going to run or if I'm going to do anything, it's a quick snap. It's a quick, it's a quick tool to shift my emotional state, my physical state into this focused. Yeah.
Yeah, understand. Takes the focus away, and you're really focused on something aside from everything else around you, right? That's good. It's interesting, like we're talking to someone that's a strength and conditioning coach, but we're talking all about everything else. And it kind of brings me into one thing I wanted to talk about, which is that balance, which is something I think, and especially talking about MMA, etc. There's a lot of places, a lot of people that I'm sure are a bit imbalanced with it, because too much focus on the external, hitting pads, wrestling, punching weights, everything, and not enough time spent on the, what we're talking about, breath work, relaxation, stretching, etc. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a question I ask myself really every day is how do I help the individual? If it's Sean, my role is that strength and conditioning coach, probably, performance coach. How do I help them? And I don't think there is a right or wrong answer. I think there's, there are probably multiple answers, and I don't know if we'll ever know which one is the best. Maybe there isn't, it's not about which one is the best, but it's complicated in MMA. And I think one of the things that we can ask ourselves is like, what are the lowest hanging fruit? How will the athlete get beat? Now, maybe he's not strong enough and we need to get him stronger, but strength has consequences, right? Strength is a skill. Getting somebody, to be able to lift max effort requires time. So there's all of these considerations. So I think it's important to think, down the chain and understand, okay, if I do this, there might be some positive effects, but are there potential negative consequences, right? That's where we're really trying to critically think down the line of, I think a lot of people think getting stronger is always good. Well, it is if everything is like controlled, which it's not, and especially in MMA, right?
Yeah.
So the point I'm making is it's fascinating in this sport. And I think from my experience, as long as somebody has the gas tank and they have enough strength and they have enough power to compete, leaning in a direction of health and recovery probably is not a bad thing, right? Now, I'm not saying that being stronger and being more explosive is not beneficial. 100% it is. I just don't think it's that simple. And I think you see it all the time where you see elite athletes in MMA, in baseball, in football that are horrible in the gym, but they're elite in their sport. So how, it's like, how do they get that done? Well, they're really good. They're specialists in their sport. And I think we have to be careful assuming that just getting stronger always is the best option, if that makes sense. I hope I answered that question. Yeah, but man. I think it's complicated, and I from my experience, what I see with MMA athletes is they're just constantly beat up. And if you're beat up and you feel like crap, you can't train, to the best of your ability. So there is a lot of value in taking a day off and feeling confident enough to recover. Yeah, I think that's really, really, really powerful.
I think that the time deficit is a big thing too, right? Because there's only so many hours in a day, and when you've got so much skill work to do, and then you add in everything else, it all becomes a bit too much. And there's a real balancing game, right? And every balance would be different for every individual as well, right?
100%. Yeah, I mean, I remember listening to a podcast from Joe Rogan with George St. Pierre's coach.
Yeah, he's a very Firas Zahabi, right?
Yeah.
Actually, he just popped into my mind when you were talking. He just popped into my mind because you were talking about what was he talking about? Something with the rest and recovery. That the aim was for consistency. So he says don't go too hard because you need to be able to get there the next day, right? So you got to watch your output so it's not too high that it ruins your next day, because you want that consistency, because that's how you get better. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. I remember listening to that same, probably talking about the same podcast, and, it was like, okay, that I'm glad that he said that, because George St. Pierre is, arguably one of the best ever. Right. Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, I've seen some of his, strength and conditioning stuff, but I doubt he's probably a freak and he's probably ridiculously strong, but I doubt he's like, a black belt in the gym like he is in his martial arts, right? Yeah. So not to say that strength and conditioning can't enhance the MMA athlete. 100%, I believe that. I mean, that's what I do. But I think again, a open-minded strength and conditioning coach understands the complexity of the human being right. Like, even if you're not an MMA athlete, the human being is complex, right? Like sleep, relationships, environment, these things all matter. And then you add in the MMA athlete, which might be the most complex sport, really. I think it's, again, like we said earlier, I just think it's like this ultimate, it's like its own specialization. You got to be good at, you have to have energy system development. You need to be powerful. You need to have endurance. You need to be strong. You have to have skill in jiu-jitsu and striking and boxing and, like, so yeah, it's a complex puzzle that's fun to be a part of.
Yeah, man.
And I think like he said, I think, if a person is leaving a gym and they feel worse and they can't train the next day because of it, that ultimately is going to affect them. So, right.
Yeah, exactly. And I have to say it because this just keeps coming back into my head is you talked about training with Ido Portal, and I just have to say something about touch butt in the park. So what do you feel about that sort of movement and flow? Well, where does that sort of fit in? Because I feel like that sort of thing benefit having a flow, and like you talk about a flow state, etc. And that seems to be something that his work is. I don't know much about. I've only seen some small videos, etc. But where does that sort of thing and flow and movement, etc., fit into the big picture of an athlete that's trying to do a particular sport?
I think it's important, man. I think it. It's I mean, I've met Ido. I've been around him. He's a really intelligent person. I think he's a philosopher, right? I really think he's a unique thinker. I think it goes back to like what we talked about. It's complex, and it's, the human first, and the brain is really important. So if an athlete believes something is beneficial, that's powerful. I tend to think my model currently is that type of stuff is more of a regen recovery. It's an off day. It's we're moving, we're breathing, we're patterning. There's improvisation, which is powerful. But that an MMA athlete can benefit from developing strength and power with quality form, right? More than some of that other stuff, but there's a place for it. And I think, again, it depends on the individual, right?
True.
It really depends on the individual, and and what is going to prevent them from winning. Is it their ability to to execute a really difficult locomotion type movement? Maybe. Is it their strength? Maybe. Is it their endurance? Maybe. So yeah, it's complex, but I have a ton of respect for him. I think he's a really, really really fascinating person, and I think he's a really, really good thinker for sure.
Awesome. Before you mention about, I've heard you a few times mention in other podcasts too about low hanging fruit, and I'm kind of interested in your take on, like, so for the average person, like myself as an example, does a sport, is reasonably fit, not too crazy fit or anything. What would be the low hanging fruit that you generally find? Like if you're meeting a client that is just generally fit and wants to improve themselves, like what would be the low hanging fruit in a general sense of the word? Like, is it strength? Is it this? What would be the key sort of points that you would work on with your average person? I know it's different for everyone, but just for your average person.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to breathing. I think a lot of times that's the lowest hanging fruit. So you have this awareness of breath, which I think has to happen first. So that's just this. Can somebody aware that they're breathing? I think most of us go through our lives unaware. We know we're breathing, right? But we're just unaware that it's happening constantly. So I think teaching somebody to follow their breath, to be aware of it, to feel it, to understand where it moves, because air will move to open spaces, right? So air goes from high to low pressure. So a lot of times what will happen is somebody's ability to create pressure is affected by how they breathe, right? So maybe somebody has chronic low back problems, but what they're doing is they're using extension, they're using a compressive strategy for stability. They're not breathing correctly. So we can correct that. So I would say number one is breathing, because of there's so many different ways we can take that. And then, I think I think just baseline aerobic fitness, I also think is really, really powerful to progress that old school, just, increasing, something volume or intensity over some type of duration is really powerful for most people. Because I think even people that are, that you would say are moderately fit probably they're not consistent with that. It might be they're doing a ton of high intensity training. So they're really good at metabolizing sugars, but they don't metabolize fat, let's say. So, if I was going to create this kind of hierarchy, I would probably say breathing, and then, really good aerobic base. And then I would probably look at like basic patterns, squat, hinge, push, pull, and teaching people how to efficiently move through those planes of motion.
Yeah. So you'd advocate simple lifts to the general population, right? People that are generally fit, right?
Yeah, and I think even the elite athlete, man, I think, we overcomplicate it. We really do. That getting somebody, even the elite of the elite, better at the squatting, the hinging, the pulling, the pushing, the carrying, and progressing it in some way towards the desired outcome is really powerful. And so it's like, understand that's like classic periodization, but then have a base understanding of like movement IQ, of movement efficiency, which is really breathing, pressure management, and shapes of the body or positions of the skeleton.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. Those two things are really powerful.
Yep, that's awesome. And obviously getting towards the end of the time frame that I've allocated. So I just wanted to touch on one more thing of your general ideas about, positively setting yourself in the right space with the right people, et cetera, to make your life, a positive thing. So you mentioned about being around the right people, et cetera, before. What are your thoughts on, other things you can set up in your life just to be positive?
Yeah, it's a great question, man. It's like my little dog right here. She's cool. Looking at me.
She's like, why don't we go on that walk?
There's an example. I mean, nature. I guess I go to that. I mean, I definitely think, being around quality people and people that have, similar goals and interests is huge. I think time in nature. I think that's a big one that, as we get pulled into technology more. I mean, again, look at this. You're in Australia. Where in Australia are you?
I'm in China, actually. I am Australian, but I'm in China.
Okay, you're in China. Okay, yeah, that's right. You said that. But, I mean, it's amazing, right? But with this ability, there also is consequence, like everything. So time in nature, I think, a breathwork practice where we're okay slowing down. That to me, I guess, again, like breaking that down is mindfulness, meditation, breathwork is really just like being okay doing nothing. That's really powerful. So these are principles that are are fairly easy to, well, they're easy, but they're extremely hard to apply. But those would be a few that I would go to.
Yep. And just something I heard you mention before about being around the right people. Today, I'm happy that I can sit here and talk with you. I found that you're a very positive person, and I like that. And I'm very appreciative to be able to sit down and talk with you. And I think that kind of lends itself to what we're talking about. I think, if you want your life to be better, it's good to seek out people that are positive. Try to surround yourself with people that are good, right?
Heck yeah, man. Yeah. I mean, I'm super grateful to be able to do this. And like this, what you're doing is another example of how we can share that and spread that, and that's really my personal mission is, to help people through fitness, through, mindset, through breath work, through all of these things. So yeah, heck yeah,
Perfect.
Man.
All right, Brandon. So anyone that wants to catch you, I've seen you mention before that you're usually pretty good through Insta. So I'll put your Insta tag at the bottom of the screen when I post this. And also your podcast, the Higher Human Performance Podcast, or of course, Premier Fitness Systems. People can find you, right?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Perfect. All right, man. Thank you again, and all the best with your endeavors. And maybe we'll catch you again at some time if I get the chance.
Toby, thank you, brother. I appreciate your time, man.